The novel The Catcher in the Rye by J.D. Salinger takes place in the 1950s. This era is typically looked back on as a mostly peaceful time in America, as the citizens of the United States were hopeful after World War II came to an end. The 50s, however, were also a time of restlessness, as people were concerned with how fast the world was changing and were threatened by the possibility of nuclear war. Television and pop culture were influencing people's lives more and more, and the population of the country was growing rapidly. Many aspects of the 1950s influenced the events and characters in The Catcher in the Rye. In the 1950s, the family structure was much different and much more conservative than it is today. Mothers typically stayed at home, fathers went to work, and children attended school and then went to college if they were able to afford it. Holden's family was structured more or less in this way. His mother stayed at home, his father went to work, and he and his sister attended school. It was assumed that Holden would go to college as he was from a relatively wealthy family. In the 50s, the economy began to rise as the Great Depression and World War II, which Holden's older brother D.B. had fought in, had come to an end. Because of the good economy, people began to buy more material goods and wanted to gain status in society and conform with their neighbors. Holden resented this conformity in society. He despised people who cared only about material items and who acted like everyone else. He often referred to them as phonies, as he believed that they acted fake. The term teenager was scarcely used before the 1950s. During this decade, however, young people began to categorize themselves into a distinct separate group. GIs who came home from the war in the late 1940s often participated in foolish and wild behaviors. It was common for teens in the 50s to copy these behaviors and act rebellious. Youth rebellion was often directed at the confines of everyday life. Holden very closely represents how a teenager may have acted in the 50s. He was rebellious in that he swore, smoked, and drank alcohol often, and he too was frustrated with society and the confines of everyday life. As a teenager, Holden was caught between the child and adult world and struggled to find himself. During the 50s, a group of writers and poets emerged and came to be known as the Beat Generation. This group of writers and poets believed that life in the 1950s was empty and meaningless, much like the way Holden appeared to feel throughout the book. Another interesting historical fact about The Catcher in the Rye was that the man who killed John Lennon, Mark David Chapman, said that the reason he had killed him was because of the novel. The Catcher in the Rye fascinated Chapman. He believed that if he killed John Lennon, he would become Holden Caulfield. Chapman believed that if Holden were a real person, he would have killed John Lennon, as Chapman believed that Lennon was a phony. Another interesting fact about the history of the novel is that parts of the book are censored in different parts of the country, especially in the South where people tend to be more conservative. People feel that Holden is not a good role model for children as he often swears, drinks alcohol, and smokes. The author of The Catcher in the Rye is J.D. Salinger. Salinger incorporated many aspects of his own life into his novel. Salinger was born in 1919 in New York. This relates to Holden because he too grew up in New York City. It was said that as a young adult, it was clear that Salinger was insightful, however he never did well in school. He failed out of the school near his home, and his parents sent him to a military academy in Pennsylvania. This very closely relates to Holden, as he was insightful but had failed out of schools many times and was sent to a prep school which was in Pennsylvania as well. 2 years after publishing The Catcher in the Rye, Salinger moved to New Hampshire where he led a solitary life and cut off contact with the public. This relates to Salinger's novel because Holden dreamed of moving away from New York City and living in rural New England. Just as Salinger did not like to talk to the public, Holden did not like to speak with people who he believed were phony. Both the 1950s and J.D. Salinger greatly influenced the characters and events in The Catcher in the Rye.